Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into the warm, honey-colored light of ancient Greece. You find yourself on a sun-dappled hillside, the kind with thyme-scented breezes and olive trees that seem to gossip with each other when the wind brushes past. Far off, a lyre strums a lazy chord, plucked with perfect rhythm, or maybe just with divine boredom. You're following the trail of a god, Apollo, the golden boy of Olympus. He's the type who always has perfect posture, perfect skin, and probably a very symmetrical sneeze. If the other gods threw a talent show, he'd enter 5 categories and win 6. But don't worry, you won't need sunscreen tonight, even if he technically pulls the sun across the sky each morning. Right now, he's lounging, maybe tuning a string, maybe staring at his own reflection in a polished bronze shield. In this sleepy corner of myth, not even the gods rush anything. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your stroll near the edge of Delphi, where pine trees hush your steps and small white flowers nudge through the rocks. No one's shouting or throwing thunderbolts right now. Apollo's got nothing on his calendar except exist impressively. Now, Apollo isn't just some divine lounge act. His origin story reads like an epic poem mashed with a celebrity tabloid. Born on the floating island of Delos, raised with speed and splendor, he was already dishing out prophecies before he could properly crawl. His mother, Leto, had to dodge a vengeful goddess and birth him on a drifting rock, so the man knows dramatic entrances. He's got the sun in his chariot and poetry in his blood. But what really defines Apollo, what makes him not just radiant, but smugly radiant, is his music. He's the god of the lyre, and legend says he didn't just play it, he played it so well that mortals would sometimes forget they were supposed to breathe. His favorite kind of applause? Probably the sound of birds falling silent in awe. Now, you might be wondering, how relaxing can a story about a competitive god really be? Well, quite, actually, because this isn't the story of war or wrath, not yet anyway. This is the tale of a god who thinks he's the only musician in the cosmos, until a baby, and later a satyr, decide to mess with that very fragile ego. But first, you get to know Apollo at his peak, before the flute rivalry, before the trickster shenanigans. He's just lounging on a stone bench beside the sacred spring, plucking gentle melodies into the air, with muses nearby braiding each other's hair and probably rolling their eyes in private. You pass by the temples dedicated to him. They're white and silent, except for bees buzzing in lazy zigzags. Historians still argue whether early depictions of Apollo show him as more youthful and sweet-faced or mature and aloof. But either way, he's always beautiful, always golden, and always slightly insufferable. One sculpture you pass catches your eye. It's of Apollo mid-performance, chin tilted up, eyes closed, a soft half-smile playing on his lips. His lyre is tucked under one arm, delicately carved, as though even marble knew better than to compete with his divine cheekbones. You stare for a long moment. The birds around the statue are real, but they're silent too. And so, for now, Apollo plays. Each note drops like a pebble into a still pond. You sit under a fig tree nearby, drifting into the rhythm. There's no crowd, no performance pressure. Just you, a sleeping tortoise somewhere under the bushes, and a god who thinks he's alone at the top of the musical food chain. But, of course, he isn't. And while the sun sets in lazy pinks and softening oranges, somewhere far off, a newborn god is being wrapped in cloth, blinking up at a mortal sky, and already plotting his first prank. A trick involving cows, sandals, and a turtle shell. Apollo doesn't know it yet, but his title of Best Musician in the Universe is about to get mildly challenged. Apollo might be basking in his own radiance for now, but not far from Mount Olympus, a very different kind of god has just arrived on the scene, tiny, wrinkled, and already scheming. You find yourself in a quiet cave tucked away in the hills of Arcadia. The air here smells of moss and warm goat fur. There's the steady drip-drip of water from stone above, and somewhere the unmistakable snuffle of a sleepy nymph trying not to panic because she just gave birth to a god who already looks like he's up to something. This baby's name is Hermes. Yes, that Hermes, god of travelers, thieves, messengers, and, crucially for tonight's tale, amateur musical inventors. He's only a few hours old, and he's already plotting the first recorded sibling rivalry in divine history. Hermes isn't like his older brother Apollo. Apollo shines and floats and philosophizes. Hermes? Hermes skids, giggles, and steals. If Apollo is a symphony, Hermes is a kazoo in a backpack full of frogs. But don't underestimate him. This little god has charm in spades, and, more importantly, he's bored. As the myths tell it, Hermes was barely out of divine diapers when he decided he was going to do something important. Now, important here is a relative term. For a newborn deity, that apparently means sneaking out of the cave, wobbling across meadows with adorable determination, and stealing a herd of sacred cattle belonging to none other than Apollo himself. You follow the path Hermes takes, tiny footprints in dewy grass, a trail that doubles back on itself, crosses streams, and somehow climbs a small hill that would probably give even adult gods shin splints. Along the way, the early morning mist curls around your ankles. Birds chirp once, then pause, confused. They're used to seeing deer and dryads. This baby, he's new. And, wouldn't you know it, he's not just stealing, he's innovating. Historians still argue whether the earliest mentions of Hermes describe him as a fully omniscient being from birth or more of a gifted toddler with an attitude problem. Either way, one thing's clear, he's crafty, very crafty. To cover his tracks, Hermes does something brilliant. He reverses the hooves of the cattle, so the prints point in the opposite direction. He also wears sandals, yes, sandals, that face backward. This is either genius-level camouflage or the divine equivalent of a prank show pilot. Either way, you can't help but admire the commitment. You picture it, a baby god in backward shoes, cheerfully humming to himself as he herds sacred cattle with a twig. You can almost hear the low moos and snorts of the confused animals as they stumble along behind him, probably wondering if this counts as overtime. And then, just as you think Hermes has fulfilled his mischief quota for the day, he takes a break in a field and sees something curious, a tortoise. Now, to you and me, a tortoise is a slow, somewhat wise-looking creature that tends to mind its own business. But to Hermes, it's an instrument waiting to happen. The myths say he picked up the tortoise shell, admired its hollow sound, and got to work. Using some of Apollo's stolen cowgut sinews, yes, you heard that right, he stretched strings across the shell and plucked the very first notes of what would become the lyre. A musical revolution born out of bovine burglary and a poor tortoise who probably just wanted a nap. You crouch in the tall grass as Hermes plucks those first notes. They're scratchy, curious, strangely melodic. There's something wild and unpolished about it, less like Apollo's elegant melodies and more like a wind chime tangled in a breeze that doesn't follow the rules. This moment, oddly enough, feels peaceful. You've got a baby god laughing to himself under the rising sun, fiddling with sinew and shell like some divine campfire musician. The cattle are lying down now, chewing cud and looking thoroughly unimpressed. And the tortoise shell? Well, let's assume Hermes gave the rest of the turtle a respectful send-off. Back in the cave, his mother Maya is probably pacing. It's barely breakfast time, and her child has already committed grand theft livestock, invented a new instrument, and broken several cosmic ordinances. Still, you're strangely comforted. There's something almost cozy about this myth. Less fire and brimstone, more bedtime mischief. No monsters yet, no fates to be tempted. Just a baby god with a big grin and sticky fingers playing music on a homemade lyre before anyone has even noticed he's missing. And, as Hermes hums to himself and tightens one last string, somewhere far away, Apollo pauses mid-song. He doesn't know why, but something feels off, as if a musical disturbance in the fabric of Olympus has just begun. But for now, Hermes rests. The sun drifts higher over the olive groves as Apollo, still basking in the sounds of his own near-perfect lyre solo, finally realizes something's amiss. The divine equivalent of a furrowed brow forms across his otherwise flawless face. A few notes in his tune seem out of place, like a minor chord that shouldn't be there. He pauses, sniffs the air, waits. And that's when he notices the cows are gone. Not just any cows, mind you. These are his sacred cattle, celestial, radiant, and probably the only herd in the world that can moo in tune. You can imagine the panic setting in, the disbelief, then the rage. His favorite herd missing, vanished from their lush, godly pastures like a magician's trick? Someone was going to pay, and by pay he probably meant melodramatically storm around Mount Olympus yelling in iambic pentameter. You follow Apollo's sandals as they crunch through the meadows of Pieria, his long cloak fluttering with each agitated step. His expression flickers between confusion and divine indignation. But when he gets to the pasture, there are no hoofprints, at least none that make sense. The trail leads in the wrong direction. You picture it, Apollo, god of logic and prophecy, kneeling on the ground, staring at backward footprints like someone trying to assemble IKEA furniture without the manual. He frowns, looks left, looks right. Even the wind seems to pause, waiting to see what he'll do. The myth says he wandered in wide loops, questioning shepherds and dryads, asking trees if they'd seen anything suspicious. Some versions even suggest he asked the sun to look backward in time, which frankly seems like cheating. Historians still argue whether Apollo was truly tricked by the backward hooves, or whether he simply refused to believe anyone would dare steal his cattle. Either way, his confusion was real and getting less cute by the second. Eventually, Apollo follows a faint shimmer of divine energy, a sort of cosmic breadcrumb trail, and ends up at a cave tucked into a craggy hillside. The smell of goats, the sound of distant snoring, and one suspiciously nonchalant mother goddess greet him. Inside, Hermes is fast asleep, wrapped in his own little chiton like a burrito. His tiny lyre is tucked under one chubby arm. He's drooling slightly. Innocence weaponized. Apollo stares. Hermes snores. Now, any normal person might think twice before accusing a literal infant of grand theft cow. But this is Olympus. Logic checks its sandals at the door. So Apollo wakes the baby up, probably not gently, and demands an explanation. Hermes yawns, stretches, claims he's been here the whole time. Eating, napping, definitely not herding stolen cattle across several provinces or inventing string instruments with turtle corpses. Nope, just a humble newborn officer. It's the divine version of who me, and Apollo is having none of it. But even Apollo, in all his blazing frustration, has to pause when Hermes, still feigning innocence, casually picks up the lyre and plucks a few sleepy notes. The air changes. The cave, once filled with tension, softens. The melody is delicate, wild, a little untamed. It's not polished like Apollo's music, but it's beautiful, original. There's something mischievously soothing about it, like hearing a lullaby played with a wink. Apollo stares. Hermes keeps playing. You sit back against the cave wall and listen, toes curling into the cool dust. This is the moment everything shifts. The myth doesn't say Apollo forgave Hermes, not exactly, but there's a silent exchange, a grudging respect, a recognition of talent. The cows are returned. The lyre is gifted. That's right. Apollo, annoyed but deeply impressed, accepts the lyre from Hermes and makes it his own. It becomes one of his symbols, one of his tools, a thing of divine beauty born from prankster mischief and a stolen tortoise. You can almost see Hermes smirking as he reluctantly hands it over. It's the kind of smugness only a baby god can pull off without getting thunderbolted. This lyre, crafted from cow guts and cleverness, will go on to shape myths, inspire poets, and become the golden instrument Apollo plays in half the statues dedicated to him. All thanks to a backwards-walking newborn with a flair from musical chaos. And as the cave grows quiet again, you lean back, letting the afternotes of that first divine melody echo in your ears. Outside, the breeze picks up. A few dandelion tufts swirl by. Somewhere, a tortoise soul finds peace, probably humming along. Apollo may have gotten his cows back and gained a shiny new lyre, but Hermes? Hermes is just getting started. You step quietly out of the cave behind him as he toddles off again, this time with a spring in his step and just the faintest glimmer of ambition in his eye, the kind that says, "What else can I poke with a stick today?" He's barely been alive for a day, and already he's invented a musical instrument, pulled off one of mythology's most ridiculous heists, and made a frenemy out of Apollo. Not bad for someone who probably still smells like ambrosia baby powder. So, what next? Well, Hermes is feeling inspired. Creating the lyre lit something in him, a spark, an itch, a need for invention. And so begins his career as Olympus's busiest tinkerer. You follow him now into a little glade near the riverbank, where reeds grow in tufts and frogs croak lazily in the sun. He crouches, plucks a reed, turns it in his chubby hands, and before you know it, yup, he's making a flute. The Panpipes, to be specific, also called the syrinx, though later myths will credit the nymph syrinx, more on that story much later, it's complicated. Hermes seems to be the first one noodling with the basic idea. Hollow reeds, cut to different lengths, bound together with twine or wax. You blow across the tops, and music comes out. Sort of, after a few minutes of awkward whistling anyway. The early notes sound like a duck with stage fright, but Hermes keeps going. He hums, he adjusts, he tries again. Historians still argue whether Hermes truly invented the panpipes, or if this was just a case of him borrowing someone else's idea and marketing it better. Either way, the result is charming, rustic, sleepy even. You watch him sit cross-legged under a fig tree, playing this new instrument to an audience of one extremely bored frog. The frog blinks slowly, unimpressed, but at least respectful. And while Apollo's music is all glory and grandeur, Hermes's tunes are soft, wandering, the kind of melody that follows a trickle of water downstream, or echoes off a canyon wall, just long enough to make you wonder if it was ever really there. It's hard not to be lulled by it. A breeze picks up, and the reeds nearby join in, rustling like an impromptu backup choir. The scent of mint and earth fills the air, and you lie back in the grass, letting the music drift over you. It's the soundtrack of a summer nap, of sandals dangling off a ledge, of ambrosia and breeze. And then he stops, because he's got another idea. He stands, brushes off his little chiton, wanders to a pile of pebbles, and starts stacking them, not at random, but in neat little rows. You inch closer and realize he's counting, creating rows, matching colors. This might not seem like much, but in a world before spreadsheets and tally marks, it's kind of revolutionary. Early versions of counting systems and trade tokens were based on physical objects, and Hermes, ever the god of commerce, is quietly laying the groundwork for what might one day become currency. You might say this god of thieves is also the father of finance. Honestly, that tracks. And while the math itself doesn't exactly make you sleepy, the rhythm of it does. Stack, stack, tap, adjust, stack again. There's something incredibly calming about watching a god fiddle with pebbles in the dirt, inventing bartering systems with the same seriousness as a toddler playing with blocks. The sun creeps westward, the frogs settle in, you hear the burble of the river and the occasional whisper of leaves overhead. Not every invention has to be grand. Some are quiet, simple, a flute, a shell, a stone, and yet they stick. Hermes doesn't stay in one place long. Already, he's up again, off to follow a new distraction. Maybe a beetle, maybe a bird call. You stand too, stretching, your joints pleasantly achy from sitting so still. There's a peaceful weariness in the air, like that soft post-lunch fog that makes even gods yawn. Somewhere far away, Zeus is probably raising an eyebrow, asking Maya if she's keeping track of her son. She isn't. But you are. You're following, watching, witnessing. And as Hermes disappears around a corner, reed flute tucked under one arm, a stone still clutched in his hand, you get the sense he's far from finished. Not with Olympus, not with inventions, not with you. You trail behind Hermes as he darts through the long grass, still somehow managing to look both delighted and entirely unsupervised. His energy doesn't fade, it just shapeshifts. One moment he's mesmerized by a shiny beetle, the next he's climbing halfway up a cypress tree to get a better look at the moon, which, for the record, hasn't moved since last night. But Hermes likes to check. And then he stops. You almost run into him as he crouches low, eyeing something in the distance. Two shepherds, mortals, sitting on a log, eating olives, utterly unaware that a divine toddler is about to mess with their entire worldview. This, you realize, is a key part of Hermes' origin story, his first interaction with mortals. Now, keep in mind, Greek gods don't usually hang out with regular people unless something dramatic is about to happen. Floods, seductions, shape-shifting punishments, lighthearted stuff. But Hermes, he's different. He doesn't hover from above like Apollo or throw tantrums like Eris. No, he walks among people, talks to them, observes. Today, he wants to try something new, lying. He saunters up to the shepherds like he belongs there, casually nibbling on a fig he absolutely did not get permission to pick. And the shepherds? They blink at him, stare, try to figure out where this baby came from and whether there's a responsible adult trailing behind him. There isn't. Nice day for grazing, Hermes says, or something equally mundane. The shepherds nod slowly, unsure if they should be concerned that the baby is speaking in full sentences and wearing what appears to be homemade sandals crafted from bark. What follows is a bizarre little exchange where Hermes pretends to be just a humble wanderer, a very, very tiny one, who definitely didn't steal any celestial cows. He asks innocent-sounding questions. He compliments their flock. He points at a goat and says, "That one looks like a philosopher." One shepherd chuckles, the other eyes him like he might be cursed. Historians still argue whether this moment marks the first time Hermes uses charm to disarm suspicion, or if he's just trying to see how far he can push the whole cute baby with adult vocabulary thing. But what we do know? It works. The shepherds relax. One offers him a bit of bread. Hermes accepts it with a toothy grin that says, "I will absolutely repay you by stealing your hat later." He doesn't, though. That comes tomorrow. You watch this strange interaction unfold and realize Hermes is learning, not just how to lie, but how to read people, their expressions, their tells, their hopes. He studies them like a musician studying a new scale. And while this may sound mildly terrifying, it's also kind of sweet. There's something earnest in the way he wants to understand humanity, not as a god lording over them, but as a fellow player on the stage. He asks about their day. They tell them about a missing lamb and a crooked fence. He listens, really listens. And when they're done, he points them in the right direction, toward the grove where the lamb wandered earlier this morning. How he knows? Don't ask. He just does. As the shepherds walk off, shaking their heads and wondering if they just had a conversation with a talking woodland spirit, Hermes smiles to himself. Mission accomplished. This is the beginning of something bigger. His reputation, his mythos, Hermes the trickster, Hermes the helper, Hermes who listens, lies, and occasionally gives excellent directions. You walk beside him as he continues along the path, the light dappled and golden through the leaves. There's a hum in the air, not from a lyre this time, but from the world itself, that strange thrum of something new beginning. And here's the kicker. Hermes isn't done experimenting with truth just yet. He begins muttering to himself, working out phrases, testing tones, practicing how to say things that sound true even when they're not. You realize you're watching the god of diplomacy being born, not with treaties and handshakes, but with curiosity and charisma. It's weirdly comforting. There's something deeply sleepy about walking beside a baby god who's inventing fibs like they're lullabies. His voice is low, rhythmic. You almost don't notice when you start to yawn. And there, on the edge of the mortal world and myth, the scene fades a little. The shepherds disappear over the hill. Hermes hums softly, tinkering with a new tune. You pause, close your eyes for a moment, and feel the sun filter through the trees like warm honey on your skin. This, you realize, is the lull between mischiefs. Hermes doesn't walk for long before he gets bored again. Not bored in the usual toddler sense, where silence and crayons lead inevitably to wall murals, but bored in the godly sense, the kind that births inventions, jobs, or mild chaos, depending on the mood. Today, it's chaos o'clock. He stops in the shade of a low olive tree and begins to dig. Not for treasure or roots or some divine calling, he just really wants to see what's under there. Turns out, rocks. But Hermes is delighted. He picks one up, weighs it in his palm, and immediately begins juggling 3 at once. Gods aren't supposed to be this good at multitasking. You sit nearby, letting the cicadas lull you into that fuzzy between state of nap and awareness, the kind where your limbs feel warm and heavy, like your half-baked bread left to rest. And then Hermes looks up, mischief on his face. He's decided to invent something else. With a couple of long curling branches and some nearby string, where does he get this stuff? He crafts something that vaguely resembles a staff, but with a twist, literally. He winds the branches into spirals around each other, wrapping them like snakes. And just like that, you're witnessing the first draft of the caduceus. You know, that famous staff with 2 snakes and wings, the symbol we now confuse with medicine, thanks 19th century mix-ups, but which originally represented Hermes and his many, many jobs: messenger, traveler, negotiator, occasional prank war instigator. Historians still argue whether the snakes came later, or whether Hermes really did befriend a pair of garden serpents but just happened to like symmetry. Either way, he plants the staff in the dirt, steps back, and nods approvingly. It wobbles. He fixes it, adds a feather. Wobbles again. He shrugs. Work in progress. You almost expect the staff to light up or start chanting, but it just stands there, elegant, odd, and weirdly impressive. The kind of object that feels ancient and futuristic all at once. Hermes names it something in ancient Greek that roughly translates to travel stick that says, "Don't mess with me." You decide to call it the caduceus because, frankly, it's bedtime and you're not memorizing any new syllables right now. With his staff complete-ish, Hermes begins practicing his official messenger walk. You know the one, fast-paced, head high, sandals flapping. He's got the vibe of a child who's just been promoted to line leader at daycare and intends to let everyone know it. He walks with purpose. You follow, less with purpose and more with the quiet resignation of someone who knows they won't be getting back to their fig nap anytime soon. Still, there's something calming about his determination, the way he struts, the way the wind catches the little feather he tied to his staff, the way each step seems to echo in soft dirt, like a drumbeat for a journey that hasn't been written yet. Because that's what Hermes is doing, you realize. He's writing himself into the world. Not just as a god of sneaky baby crimes, but as something more. A traveler, a guide, a go-between. Someone who moves between realms and roles without asking for permission. Who smooths the wrinkles between mortals and gods, lies and truth, wakefulness and sleep. As dusk begins to shade the sky, you notice the staff glowing faintly. Or maybe that's just your eyes adjusting. The light slants gold, softening the world around you into peach and plum hues. The wind is gentler now, less playful, and more like a lullaby. Hermes pauses on a rise in the land and looks out over the hills. You stand beside him. He's quiet for a moment, and it's the kind of quiet that hums. Not silence, but presence. The world isn't asleep, it's just pausing, holding its breath, letting this little god have his moment. He lifts the staff, just slightly, and the breeze answers. Somewhere in the distance, a bird calls. Somewhere closer, an idea forms. And you? You breathe in deeply and feel your shoulders loosen. Your eyelids droop a little. Because this isn't just a story about what Hermes makes, it's a story about motion, imagination, and those strange twilight hours where anything seems possible. Where gods wander barefoot and snakes become symbols, and the stars haven't yet turned cold. And as Hermes turns once again toward the road, staff in hand, and sleep in the corners of his grin, you know he's not done walking. And neither are you. Not just yet. The road bends downhill now, winding through sleepy groves and quiet, humming fields. Hermes, with his half-finished caduceus and the breezy confidence of someone who is never scolded, decides it's time for another invention. This time, trade. You walk beside him as he digs into the little pouch he tied to his belt, probably stolen from Apollo or some unsuspecting goat, and starts counting his inventory. A piece of quartz, a shiny beetle shell, 2 olives, 1 half-chewed fig, and a feather that may or may not be from a divine goose. Now, if you're expecting him to pull out gold coins or divine gemstones, think again. Hermes isn't about wealth in the way you think. He's interested in value, in the odd little things people care about enough to trade, the things that tell stories. He spots a passing farmer hauling a basket of grapes. Hermes jogs over, staff clattering, olives jostling in his pouch, and offers him a deal. 1 shiny beetle wing for a small handful of grapes. The farmer blinks, then, to your utter surprise, agrees. Because the beetle wing? Iridescent, gorgeous, probably perfect for that amulet his daughter is stringing together from bits of nature and luck. And just like that, the first divine trade is made. Historians still argue whether this story, Hermes inventing barter on a whim, is real myth or symbolic metaphor. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that Hermes is creating something we still live with every day. The idea that value isn't fixed. That a beetle wing can be as precious as gold, if you offer it with the right smile. After a few more impromptu transactions, a feather for a crust of bread, a fig half for a flute reed, Hermes settles beneath a fig tree and organizes his growing stash. You watch him sort each item with the care of a child building a museum. A weird, slightly sticky museum where half the exhibits hum when the wind blows. You lie back in the grass, hands behind your head, and let your eyes drift toward the canopy. The sun is beginning its slow descent now, painting the world in soft amber tones. Bees float lazily from flower to flower, and somewhere in the distance, a goat sneezes. It's oddly peaceful, this marketplace in miniature. No shouting vendors, no scales or coin purses, just quiet exchanges, each one built on curiosity and trust. Hermes doesn't care if he profits, he just wants to see what happens. He turns to you at one point and says, "Did you know you can trade a lie for a story?" You blink. "Isn't that what you've been doing all day?" He grins. And it's here, in this moment, that you begin to understand why Hermes becomes the god of not just merchants and messengers, but also gamblers, storytellers, and poets. Anyone who deals in possibility, in promises, in the flickering line between real and almost real. He doesn't just move things, he moves meaning. As he leans back, arms behind his head in perfect mimicry of your pose, he starts composing a story about his day. Except in his version, the beetle was a sacred relic, the olive enchanted, the farmer a disguised titan. You don't correct him. There's something deeply drowsy about the way his words tumble into the air like warm smoke. He speaks softly, the kind of voice that makes you forget where your body ends and the ground begins. The grass cradles you. The breeze hums like an old lullaby. Even the fig tree seems to lean closer, listening. You drift somewhere between waking and dreaming, as Hermes weaves tales from nonsense and half-truths, gilding them with that strange spark only gods seem to carry. You hear, "And then I traded the pebble for a cloud." The goat swore it could predict the future. "And that's how I accidentally founded the first post office." You chuckle softly, eyes closed. Not because it's believable, but because it's Hermes, and honestly, you'd believe just about anything from him right now. The stars haven't come out yet, but the sky is deepening. A soft violet stretches above the horizon, and you can almost taste the coming dusk. Cool, a little dusty, with hints of olive smoke and sleeping flowers. Hermes stretches, pocketing his treasures, and looks out toward the horizon. His expression is unreadable for a moment, like he's hearing something far off, a whisper on the wind maybe, or a memory that hasn't happened yet. Then he stands. "Time to move again," he says. You follow, because with Hermes, the path is never straight. It winds like a story, like trade, like truth dressed in sandals and a crooked smile. And each step forward carries you deeper into the dream. The night falls slowly, like a curtain being drawn with exaggerated care. Hermes doesn't rush. Gods, you're learning, rarely do. They dawdle in twilight, savoring transitions the way mortals savor ripe fruit, slowly, with sticky fingers and a little awe. You're walking now on a path barely more than a suggestion, just a ribbon of worn earth winding between tall grasses that whisper like old women. Hermes hums, not a song exactly, more like a series of cheerful sounds he invents as he goes, half whistled, half muttered, with occasional chicken impressions. You've stopped questioning things. The moon begins its gentle climb, a silver coin tossed into a darkening fountain, and Hermes glances upward with approval. "She's punctual tonight," he says, as if the moon has a shift to clock into. And then you hear it. Faint at first, but unmistakable. Drums. Hermes grins. You approach a small encampment tucked in a hollow between hills. Torches flicker. People sway around a low fire, their shadows dancing along with them. It's a band of traveling performers, humans this time, draped in mismatched robes and jangling with beads. They're singing something that probably started as a hymn and got distracted halfway through. Hermes walks right in, welcomed like a regular. One of the jugglers tosses him an apple. He juggles it with 2 burning sticks and a pine cone, just to show off. You don't even flinch. Of course he can juggle fire. What happens next is a kind of unspoken barter. Hermes offers stories. The troupe offers songs. He trades a poem for a tale about a haunted fig tree. He gives them a riddle, they answer with a dance. You sit near the fire, warm and drowsy, watching it all unfold like a scene from some forgotten bedtime book. Someone hands you a drink that tastes like spiced rainwater and dreams. There's a girl, maybe 10 years old, maybe eternal, who recites a prophecy in rhyme. Hermes claps and asks if she takes payment in polished stones. She says yes, but only the blue ones. And through it all, Hermes becomes more than a god again. He's part of the circle, a companion, a weaver of moments. Historians still argue whether Hermes was ever truly worshipped like the Olympians, or more feared in quiet corners. Whether he was a prankster in disguise, or something gentler, a god for travelers, for those who never quite belonged. But sitting here, you see it clearly. Hermes is the god of in-betweens, of crossroads, firelight, temporary families made from nothing but shared songs and warm food. He lives in the spaces where definitions blur. After a while, he pulls out the caduceus and holds it close to the flames. The 2 entwined branches shimmer. Someone, an old man with eyes like river stones, tells a story about how the staff controls dreams, if held just right. Another swears it can find lost socks. You decide both are probably true. Eventually, the laughter softens, the music slows, and people drift into piles of blankets or simply lie back in the grass. A lull settles over the camp like a second layer of night. Hermes lies beside you, arms folded behind his head, eyes on the stars. "Want to hear a secret?" he whispers. You nod. "I made up half of my titles." You smile. "Only half?" He chuckles softly, the sound almost blending with the wind. The rest were gifted. He doesn't explain. You don't ask. The fire crackles low. Somewhere, someone snores like a contented goose. The air smells like smoke and time. And above you, the stars blink like tired eyes, not quite ready to close. You feel it now, the deep, molten calm of a night without urgency. A night built for drifting, for slow thoughts, for letting go. Hermes rolls onto his side and says, "You know the best trades are the ones no one remembers making?" You nod, half asleep already. "This," he says, gesturing lazily to the starlit camp, the glowing caduceus, the snoring goat, "this is one of them." You smile into the blanket of grass. You don't know what you've traded, but it feels like it was worth it. And as the wind kisses your forehead and the world hums its lullaby, you finally let your eyes close, just for a moment, just until the next journey begins. You wake slowly, blinking against the early light that filters through the canopy of trees. Dew clings to your sleeves, cool and weightless. Hermes is already up, of course, crouched beside a shallow stream, washing something shiny and probably questionably acquired. He grins when he sees you stir. "Rise and wander," he says, as if that's a well-known proverb. It isn't, but maybe it will be someday. The camp has vanished as mysteriously as it appeared. No sign of the traveling performers, no ashes where the fire had danced. It's just you, Hermes, and the lazy trickle of water curling between stones. Breakfast is improvised. A few stolen figs, a hunk of goat cheese that Hermes won in a riddle contest with himself, and some flatbread that may have been tucked under his hat. The food is simple, the flavors strong. Even the cheese tastes like it's been told a good joke. As you chew, Hermes begins a new tale. There was once a temple built entirely from bones. Well, not human bones, mostly deer, but the worshippers claimed it sang when the wind hit it right. You don't interrupt. You've learned that Hermes' stories are like old footpaths, winding, occasionally absurd, but they always lead somewhere. Today's path leads you along the stream, through reeds and mossy banks, where frogs sing like half-awake opera singers and dragonflies flicker like tiny blue lightning bolts. Hermes walks ahead, tapping his caduceus against rocks, not for any reason, just to hear the different tones. Then he stops. Before you lies a crumbling stone marker, barely visible beneath ivy and lichen. Hermes brushes it off. "Boundary stone," he says. "These used to mark where one god's influence ended and another's began." You squint at the inscription. It's faded, worn by centuries of rain and the occasional curious squirrel. Still, you can make out part of a name. Herm something. He looks proud. "They carved that after I stole a temple from Apollo." You raise an eyebrow. "Stole a temple?" He shrugs. "Well, relocated, with enthusiasm." Historians still argue whether Hermes ever really had temples of his own, or whether he was always more of a roadside figure, half worshipped at mile markers, at crossroads, in forgotten corners and boundary lines, a god of the margins. But that, perhaps, was the point. He was never meant to be grand or immovable. He was the god you met on the road when you were lost, the whisper in your ear when you needed to lie convincingly, the unseen hand that swapped your purse with a frog and made you laugh about it later. You leave the boundary marker behind and continue into a thicket of tall ferns and early daisies. Birds chatter above, sounding like gossips who've just discovered sandals exist. Hermes hums again, this time something resembling a lullaby he swears was popular in Atlantis. "Do you think the gods are fading?" you ask, suddenly. He doesn't look back, only when people forget how to wonder. You walk in silence after that. The trail leads uphill, then crests into a clearing where wildflowers grow in dense, chaotic waves. Hermes stoops and begins making a crown, not for himself, for a lizard. You watch him gently place a daisy circlet on the creature's head. It doesn't resist. Maybe it's just as enchanted as you are. "Do you know what the caduceus actually does?" he asks, lifting the staff. You shake your head. He twirls it. The two entwined branches glimmer faintly. "Depends who's holding it," he says. "For me, it keeps stories balanced. Lies on one side, truth on the other. No one gets crushed." You smile. "Neat trick." "It's not a trick," he replies, mock offended. "It's diplomacy." Then, with a snap of his fingers, the caduceus stiffened, glowing momentarily, before returning to its usual crooked self. There, tuned it. You don't ask to what. You don't need to. Instead, you lie back in the grass again, letting the scent of crushed flowers and warm earth wrap around you. The clouds drift above, like lazy travelers, and Hermes starts narrating their shapes. That one looks like a goat eating a book. That one's definitely a flying shoe. That one, he trails off. That one's my dad, probably spying. You laugh, the kind that bubbles up quietly and lingers, even as your eyes close again. Because the best part of traveling with Hermes isn't the magic or the mischief. It's the way the world softens around him. Like even reality gets a little drowsy in his presence. The boundary stones crumble, the wildflowers sway, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of trickling water turns into a tune you almost recognize, half lullaby, half memory. And for a while, you don't need a destination. Just the road, just the rhythm of your steps, and the quiet, unspoken promise that wherever Hermes goes, the story never really ends. Your feet ache gently, the pleasant kind of ache that comes after a long walk, where time doesn't matter. The forest has thinned, giving way to scrubby hills dappled with wild thyme and sun-bleached stones. The sky yawns overhead, immense, soft blue, and endlessly empty, save for a single hawk lazily tracing circles above. Hermes is chewing something. You're not sure what. Possibly licorice root, possibly a piece of string he insists is mint adjacent. He offers you a bite. You politely decline. You come across a sunken road now, one of those half-forgotten Roman paths, worn deep into the earth by centuries of sandals, hooves, and reckless merchant carts. The grooves in the stone are oddly soothing to step into, like fitting your feet into ancient memories. As you walk, Hermes begins telling a story in a tone that suggests he's not entirely convinced it's true, but likes it anyway. So, there's this belief, he says, that once every 100 years, a mortal finds their way to Olympus by accident, usually while sleepwalking or after eating an extremely weird mushroom. Anyway, the gods argue over whether to send them back or let them stay. And do they stay, you ask? Hermes smirks. Only if they can make Zeus laugh. That, apparently, is harder than it sounds. Last guy just juggled a goose and sneezed confetti. Didn't go well. He hops onto a rock as you pass a fork in the trail. Left takes us to the Valley of Echoes. Right leads to the abandoned Oracle School, where everything smells like lavender and chalk. You pause. I vote lavender, he says, and starts walking before you can respond. The Oracle School, when you reach it, is in better shape than expected. Pillars lean drunkenly, but the main hall still stands. Inside, the air is cool and dry, thick with the scent of dusty papyrus and, yes, lavender. Somehow, it's still growing in tiny pots left on windowsills. Who waters them? No one knows. Probably a very organized ghost. You run your fingers across a stone bench, carved with script too ancient to read. Hermes runs his along a fresco of a goat wearing a crown. She predicted the price of barley for 50 straight years, he explains, retired rich. Historians still argue whether oracles ever existed in the numbers ancient texts suggest, or whether many were just eccentric poets with good marketing. Some claim the schools were elaborate cons. Others insist they were genuine sanctuaries of feminine power and plant-based hallucination. Hermes has opinions, but they change hourly. He leads you to a room that once served as a dormitory. It's empty now, except for a chalkboard with the words Divine Math Test Monday still scrawled across it, and a faint smell of cardamom. You sit together in the shade, watching dust motes do ballet in the sunbeams. So, you ask, what's the weirdest thing anyone ever predicted? Hermes doesn't even hesitate. A drought of questions. You blink. What? Exactly. They predicted a time when no one would want to know anything anymore. Just float along. That's oddly terrifying. Hermes nods. But it was short-lived. Someone asked what frogs dream about, and the drought ended. You rest your head back against the wall, warm stone against your scalp, lavender on the breeze. Hermes lies beside you, arms folded, hat tipped down to cover his eyes. Outside, a crow caws exactly 3 times. Hermes counts out loud, and declares it either an omen or just a very dramatic bird. You begin to feel the now familiar softness of this journey settling in again, the way time seems to flatten, like dough under a gentle rolling pin. No rush, no deadline, just story after story, folded like silk into the fabric of your sleepy thoughts. There's a map on the wall, faded ink lines that no longer make sense. Hermes stares at it for a while. "I think this used to be the sky," he says, "before it got rearranged." You don't ask what he means, you just let the silence expand. He tosses you a coin, not gold, not silver, something older. You flip it, and instead of heads or tails, it lands on a tiny painted eye, open, watching. "Lucky," he says, "means you're still curious." You smile. Somewhere in this cracked school of abandoned visions and dusty futures, you realize you don't need answers. Not now, not tonight. Just stories. And maybe a god who juggles pine cones for no reason at all. By the time you leave the oracle school, the light has shifted into that golden, syrupy hue that makes everything feel older and more forgiving. The hills look like sleeping giants under sun-warmed quilts, and the wind carries the scent of crushed herbs and long-forgotten secrets. Hermes walks beside you, quiet for once, chewing on a stalk of fennel and occasionally flicking pebbles at suspicious-looking shrubs. When you ask what he's doing, he replies, "Some bushes are spies. You never know with olives." You don't press. The path leads you to a ridge where the land dips dramatically into a lush green hollow, somewhere between a meadow and a crater. In the center, surrounded by a tangle of vines and wild roses, stands a single weather-worn statue. You can't make out its features from this distance, but Hermes sighs when he sees it. "Ah," he says, softly, "the god of almost." You glance at him, confused. She, or maybe he, depends who you ask, was the deity people invoked when things nearly worked out. Almost made it, almost fell in love, almost became king. Patron of not-quites and near misses. You blink. That's surprisingly comforting. "Isn't it?" Hermes grins. "Very relatable. Not a lot of temples, but people mutter their name under their breath a lot." As you approach, the statue becomes clearer. It's ambiguous in form, half smile, half shrug. One arm reaching upward, the other held back, as if eternally hesitating. It's mossy, cracked, and covered in tiny etchings, initials, prayers, tiny hearts pierced with arrows that never quite touch. You sit beside it. Hermes does too. Neither of you says much for a while. The hollow feels like a pause in the world, a pocket of stillness where even birds forget to sing. Eventually, Hermes pulls out a tiny scroll and unrolls it. "People used to leave their almosts here," he explains, "on paper. Burned them as a sort of ritual. Helps with closure." He hands you a bit of parchment and a piece of charcoal. "Go on." You hesitate. Then, slowly, you write, "Almost learned to whistle." Hermes peeks and nods solemnly. A tragic loss. His, you notice, simply says, "Almost made Dad proud once." Then, with a wink, he crumples it and tosses it into a tiny fire he conjures with a snap. The flames puff violet and vanish like a sneeze. Historians still argue whether rituals like this were symbolic, psychological, or purely superstitious. Some claim they helped release emotional burdens. Others insist they were performative gestures for social cohesion. Hermes, he just calls it emotional composting. As the last curl of smoke drifts into the air, he reaches into his bag and pulls out 2 pairs. They're oddly fresh, suspiciously so. "Don't ask," he says, handing one to you. You bite. It tastes like summer in a place you've never been. Then Hermes stands, brushing off his robes. Time to move again. The god of almost only lets you rest for so long, before it becomes the god of procrastination. Whole different vibe. You laugh and follow him up the ridge, the sun now grazing the horizon like it's not quite ready to go down. You pass a tree that's grown sideways, and Hermes insists it's on purpose, for aesthetic reasons. The next path is narrow, carved into the hillside like a secret. It leads to an abandoned shepherd's hut made entirely of stacked slate and wishful thinking. There's a blanket inside that smells faintly of mutton and thyme. Hermes calls dibs and flops down. You settle outside, watching the sky shift through colors that don't have names. Hermes hums a lullaby in a language no one's spoken in centuries. It sounds like wind through feathers. "I've always liked mortals," he says, voice muffled through the blanket. "So curious, so clumsy, so weird." You grin. "Thanks?" "No, I mean it," he continues. "You all want so badly to matter. And you do, in these weird little ways. You name stars, you invent recipes, you ask frogs if they dream." "Do they?" Hermes shrugs. "Probably about flies." You lie back and let the weight of the day settle. You feel lighter somehow, as though dropping that almost by the statue really did do something, even if it was just to make space for the next story. Because with Hermes, there's always a next story. Always another path, another god, another forgotten ritual, or lizard coronation. The shepherd's hut creaks gently in the breeze. Somewhere, a goat bleats into the evening and gets no response. The stars begin to blink on, shy and scattered at first, then more confident, like a sleepy audience. You wake to the gentle sound of Hermes attempting to toast something over an imaginary fire. There is no flame, only a stick and what might be a slightly stale biscuit. He's narrating the process in a very solemn tone, as though hosting a divine cooking show. "And now," he intones, "we rotate the offering to ensure both sides are evenly sanctified in invisible heat." You sit up, stretch, and blink away the last clinging threads of dreams. The sky is early morning lavender, and the shepherd's hut creaks softly, as if it too is trying to stretch its limbs. Hermes tosses you a second biscuit. It lands in your lap with the dramatic finality of a script ending. "Breakfast," he says, a bit chewy, a bit metaphorical. You nibble it cautiously. It tastes like something a goat might consider food adjacent. As you walk, the hills roll beneath your feet like slow waves. The landscape begins to change again, less rocky now, more meadow and orchard. Trees twist into odd shapes, and some of them hum quietly. Hermes assures you this is normal. Fruit trees talk to each other, he says, mostly gossip. Who ripened too fast? Which squirrel is stealing again? The usual. A narrow stream winds ahead, shallow and crystal clear. You cross it by stepping on carefully placed stones, each one painted with a strange symbol: a snail, a shoe, a teacup. Hermes skips across like a child playing hopscotch with fate. Once across, he points to a grove of olive trees. This, he announces, is the grove of minor miracles. You raise an eyebrow. Minor? Very minor, he confirms. We're talking missing sock kind of miracles. Coins found under cushions, soup not boiling over. The trees rustle as if chuckling. You step into the grove, and the air shifts. It's warmer here, more golden. Bees hum sleepily from flower to flower. A cat with 3 eyes blinks at you from the branch of a fig tree, yawns, and vanishes. Hermes touches one of the olive trees gently. These were planted by a goddess no one remembers anymore. She specialized in helping people find things they weren't looking for. Like what? Old letters, forgotten dreams, the perfect hat. You find a bench carved from some ancient glossy wood and sit. Hermes paces thoughtfully. See, big miracles get all the press. Burning bushes, parted seas, but minor ones, that's where the magic really lives. You lose a sock, find it in your other shoe. That's a miracle. It doesn't change the world, just tweaks it, makes it kinder. Historians still argue whether ancient societies truly believed in minor deities like this, or if they were just metaphors for luck, chance, and the everyday wonders of being alive. Some archaeologists insist entire temples were built to spirits of lost objects and mild relief. Others claim it's all exaggeration, scribes having fun. Hermes leans toward the former camp. He insists he once met the god of aha moments in a cafe in Delphi. Very jittery, he recalls, kept misplacing his spoon. A breeze stirs through the grove, and tiny bells tinkle from unseen branches. You feel not happy exactly, but balanced, like a tray finally set down gently after a long walk. Hermes offers you a small olive branch. For luck, he says, and snacks later. The sun has fully risen now, casting long shadows that stretch like yawns across the grass. You walk through the grove, brushing your fingers against low-hanging fruit and feeling that subtle buzz of invisible kindness that seems stitched into the place. At the edge of the grove, a small wooden sign reads, "Lost? Excellent." You and Hermes both nod in approval. The path narrows again, bordered by tall grass and swaying wildflowers. Bees drift lazily between blooms. Hermes hums a tune you swear you almost recognize, something from childhood or a dream or an elevator you once fell asleep in. Eventually, you come to a stone bench under an arch of vines. You sit, Hermes sits. The silence here is full, but not heavy. So, you ask after a while, what's the best minor miracle you've seen? Hermes doesn't answer immediately. He looks up at the sky, then down at his dusty sandals. Once, he says softly, I watched someone cry from happiness because they found an old recipe their grandmother wrote, tucked inside a book they hadn't opened in decades. You nod. You don't need to say anything else. He tosses a pebble into the grass. That's the thing about mortals. You keep the tiniest things in your hearts.
You flip the coin. It turns once, twice, then lands silently in your hand. Blank, just as before. But somehow, Hermes reads it like a book. He nods solemnly. Cave of Cancelled Quests, it is. You raise an eyebrow. That was heads. He shrugs. It was vibes. The two of you set off down a path that quickly grows darker. Trees close in above, forming a canopy that muffles sound and filters the light into soft greens and grays. The birds here don't sing, they whisper. The air smells like moss, wet stone, and very old regrets. As you walk, Hermes tells you that the cave isn't on any maps. Not because it's secret, more because it refuses to be pinned down. It moves around, he explains. Usually pops up near people who are giving up on something. Abandoned novels, half-knitted sweaters, doomed love letters, that sort of thing. You pause. So, it's sad? Hermes tilts his head. Not exactly. It's restful. A place for ideas that needed to be put down. Not because they were bad, but because the timing wasn't right, or the person changed, or the quest just ran out of steam. The cave mouth comes into view, a jagged crack in a low hillside, half hidden behind ivy and ferns. Cool air flows from it like a sigh. Inside, it's surprisingly warm. The walls glow faintly with lichen, and soft bioluminescent fungi light your path. It's quiet, but not in a scary way, more like a deep library at night. You walk deeper in, passing carved alcoves and strange little shrines. In one nook, there's a sword still in its scabbard, propped beside a pair of boots. A plaque reads, Quest to Rescue the Moon's Daughter, 412 BCE. Abandoned due to logistics and mild ankle sprain. You chuckle. Hermes just nods. Classic. In another alcove, a lute rests beside a tattered music scroll. The melody is unfinished. A ghost of the tune hums in the air, looping endlessly at the last 3 notes. Farther in, you find a set of blueprints for a flying chariot shaped like a whale. Too ambitious, the note reads, also scared of heights. You wander through the softly lit chambers, each one holding some dream that was once everything to someone, and then let go. Not destroyed, not ridiculed, just released. Historians still argue whether this cave, or places like it, ever physically existed, Hermes muses, trailing a finger along a wall etched with faded sigils. Some say it's a metaphor for the ancient mindset. Others think it was a ritual space, or maybe a storage unit for failed ideas. But me, he pats the wall fondly. I think it's memory.
In one chamber, you sit cross-legged before a fire that doesn't burn. It flickers and glows, but gives off no heat, just light and the faint scent of lavender. Hermes produces a small clay tablet from his bag. Here, he says, write down a quest you never finished. You hesitate. There's a lot to choose from. The book you never wrote, the friendship you didn't save, the language you meant to learn but let drift. You settle on one. Tried to build a kite that could carry me. You etch it clumsily into the clay. Hermes reads it, grins, and adds, I once tried to teach a tortoise to tap dance. You look at him. It had rhythm, he insists. You both place your tablets on a stone shelf with dozens of others. Some are cracked, some look fresh, one is still damp. Then, together, you sit in silence. It feels like a soft goodbye to versions of yourself you've outgrown. Eventually, Hermes stands. All right, that's enough nostalgia. Let's go make some new failures. You smile as you follow him out of the cave, back into the light. The air feels warmer now, brighter, lighter. You glance back just once, and the cave is gone. In its place, a small stone, shaped eerily like a sleeping cat. Some places don't stick around once you've learned what you needed, Hermes says, not looking back. Kinda like that lute instructor I had. Weird guy, hummed through his nose. As you return to the open hills, the sky has taken on that soft late afternoon color, a golden hush. The grass seems greener, the path smoother, your steps lighter. And there, tucked in your pocket, is a tiny slip of clay, not the whole tablet, just a sliver, a keepsake, a reminder. You look up. Hermes is already 10 steps ahead, whistling a tune that feels like beginnings. You catch up to Hermes as the path begins to widen, framed now by low stone walls draped in moss. The sun slants lower, and the landscape is touched with that late-day glow that makes everything feel briefly enchanted. Even the weeds seem to sigh with meaning. Ahead, you see what looks like a crossroads, marked not by a signpost, but by a massive, sleepy-looking tortoise wearing a tiny, lopsided hat. Hermes salutes it. This, he says, is Trevor, guardian of meandering decisions. You blink. Trevor? Trevor, Hermes confirms. He's been here for, 2 millennia or so. Not in a hurry. The tortoise blinks slowly. You get the feeling Trevor has thoughts, but he's just not ready to share them yet. Maybe in another 100 years. Beyond Trevor, the road splits in 3. Hermes doesn't consult a map. Instead, he pulls a handful of pebbles from his pocket and lets them fall. One bounces left. He nods. That way. Really, you ask? Pebble logic? Best kind. They don't overthink. The path veers toward a soft grassy hill, dappled with wild thyme and small blue flowers. A wooden sign leans drunkenly against a post. Welcome to the Valley of Pleasant Distractions. You're not sure what you expected, perhaps a maze or tiny shouting pixies, but what you get is comfort. The valley rolls gently downward into a series of cozy-looking nooks, hammocks strung between whispering trees, low tables piled with slightly stale pastries, forgotten books open to well-loved pages, half-finished board games waiting patiently for a second player to return. Hermes takes off his sandals and sinks into a mossy armchair shaped suspiciously like a giant teacup. You find a swing that creaks in the most satisfying, nap-inducing way. It smells faintly of cardamom and rain. Historians, Hermes murmurs from behind a magazine titled Cloud Forms of the Lesser Aegean, still argue whether the ancients actually indulged in rest for rest's sake. Most recorded leisure activities were wrapped in ceremony, or religious observance, or social obligation. He tosses the magazine aside. But personally, I think people have always needed silly breaks. They just didn't write about them. Tuesday, fell asleep under fig tree, dreamt of frogs with hats. Doesn't make great history scrolls. In one corner of the valley, a man is earnestly attempting to stack teacups on a chicken. The chicken appears to be deeply invested in the outcome. No one questions this. You pass a couple playing a very slow game of something resembling chess, only the pieces keep wandering off. Their strategy appears to be mostly about letting them. As you lie back, the sky above seems to ripple slightly, like fabric tugged by a breeze. Hermes whispers, "This place, it's where ambitions come to nap. Not to die, just to snooze." You let your eyes close, just for a moment. The soundscape here is oddly specific. Distant harp tuning, the occasional plop of a plum falling onto a pillow, and the soft tisk of someone trying to remember the rules of a forgotten card game. You dream of clouds shaped like chairs, and chairs shaped like regrets, and regrets shaped like pastries. You wake with a start, wondering if you drooled. Hermes is now building a tower from mismatched playing cards and spoons. "Impressive," you say. He shrugs. "Mediocre architecture is my third best skill." Eventually, he stands and brushes off his tunic. "All right, time to go. Too much relaxing, and we risk becoming folklore ourselves." You sigh, but follow. The path curls once more, rising back into higher ground. As you walk, Hermes tugs at a daisy, spins it once, and tucks it behind your ear. "Not everything has to mean something," he says. "Some things are just daisy-worthy." You leave the valley behind, but the smell of time clings to your clothes, and your heartbeat feels half a beat slower. You glance back one last time. The board games are still waiting. The chicken has acquired a monocle. Somewhere, in the not-so-distant future, someone might stumble into that same valley and wonder if it was real, or if it was just what they needed in that moment. You walk on, and somewhere behind you, Trevor blinks once, approvingly.
The path you now follow grows thinner, its borders soft with overgrown clover and curling vines. Each step feels quieter than the last, the kind of hush that happens when the world begins to sleep alongside you. Hermes isn't in a rush. He's whistling something tuneless, absent-mindedly spinning a pebble between his fingers. The sky has softened into early twilight, hints of peach and mauve brushing the clouds like sleepy fingertips. You crest a small hill and see it. A gently crumbling amphitheater tucked into a bowl of land. The stone seats are rounded smooth with time, and wildflowers grow between the cracks. In the center stands a single low pedestal, bearing a cracked lyre and a scroll tied with faded ribbon. Hermes sighs contentedly. Ah, the archive of incomplete endings. You raise an eyebrow. I thought we already went to the cave of canceled quests. He grins. Different thing. That was about giving up. This place is about not finishing. Subtle difference. One's surrender, the other's poetic laziness. You walk the rows in silence. Each seat seems to hold a trace of someone who once sat there. Half-written stories, paintings with blank corners, blueprints for temples that were never funded. One seat bears a single word, carved deep. Almost. Hermes leads you to the center. This, he says, is where the gods come to muse when even they don't know how something should end. The ancient epics, many of those were dreamed here. So were the weird ones, Boy Marries Eagle, or City Ruled by Talking Breadstick. Those were experimental phases. You kneel and untie the ribbon from the scroll. It unfurls into a language you can't read, yet somehow understand. A tale with characters who are just about to fall in love, or betray each other, or turn into trees. It doesn't say. It just stops. You let the scroll roll back up. "It's kind of beautiful," you whisper. "Exactly," Hermes replies. "There's a whole art to not finishing. The ancients called it teleos meteoros, complete incompleteness, or they would have if they'd ever gotten around to naming it." You sit in silence for a long while. The stars blink into existence, one by one, shy but steady. Historians still argue whether incomplete works should be preserved or finished posthumously, Hermes muses. Some say it's a disservice to the original vision. Others say it's a chance to honor it. He stretches out on a cool slab of marble. Me, I think sometimes an open-ended story is the kindest gift. It leaves room for dreams. The night grows deeper. The amphitheater sighs gently with the weight of centuries.
In the distance, soft drums begin to beat, a rhythm not of war or dance, but of bedtime. Slow, even, the heartbeat of myth winding down. You lie beside Hermes, staring up at the night sky. A constellation shaped like a spoon, another like a loaf of bread. Possibly coincidence, possibly not. And then, gently, the world begins to dim.
The stars above twinkle a little softer now. The warmth of the stones beneath you seeps up through your skin, into your muscles, into your bones, like a lullaby made of heat and stillness. You feel the weight of the day, not just this one, but all the ones before, begin to melt quietly away, like a fog lifting from the hills just before dawn. Hermes doesn't speak anymore. He just grieves in a slow, even rhythm beside you, the kind of rhythm that your own body can't help but echo. Slower now, softer. The amphitheater, the scroll, the garden of half-finished thoughts, they all begin to drift, not vanish, but fade into the fabric of dreaming, into that gentle twilight space where memory blends with imagination, and time has the decency to mind its own business for a while. Maybe tomorrow you'll chase another coin toss, or return to the cave with a fresh clay tablet. Maybe not. It doesn't matter now. You're here, held quietly by the sleepy hush of ancient marble and mythic moss, by a god who knows when to speak and when to let silence do the work. Your limbs are heavy now. Your thoughts are light. The boundary between waking and dreaming has thinned to a whisper. So rest. Let the past keep its secrets. Let the stories stay half told. Let the stars blink slowly overhead, one soft sigh at a time. And sleep, dear listener. Sleep.